This is how to make sourdough in 5 easy steps. Let's learn.
Do you believe in magic?
You will need a sourdough starter. You can ask a friend, you can buy a dehydrated one, or you can make your own from scratch. What I recommend is getting a dehydrated one because it will have a more mature taste. I got mine from Etsy. It was 150 years old, and I've been maintaining it and feeding it for a year now. If you're interested in mine, DM me on Instagram. Let me show you how to rehydrate it. A scale is super important. We will measure out 3 to 4 grams, which is about a teaspoon of dehydrated starter, and mix about a tablespoon of distilled lukewarm water, that's 15 grams, with 15 grams of all-purpose flour. And I use a very specific brand of all-purpose flour. Now, mix everything together and let it rest and feed it the next day at the very same time. The second feeding will be 25 grams of sourdough rehydrated starter, and then 50 grams of all-purpose flour and 50 grams of distilled lukewarm water. Very important, do not use tap water. Mix everything together, and on day 3, repeat exactly the same step and it will be ready to use. You can pop it in the fridge for a week and feed it every week with that same ratio of 25 grams of starter, 50 grams of water, and 50 grams of all-purpose flour. Let's take a look at our rehydrated sourdough starter and what it should look like. It doubled in size, and look at those bubbles. It is extremely important to have this much activity in your starter. You can see bubbles all over. This is ready to be fed again, and you can then store it in the fridge. Once you have a healthy sourdough starter, you can try dehydrating it yourself. Use some parchment paper and make sure to put 2 pieces together, roll things out, let it dehydrate for 24 to 48 hours. And then you can use a mortar and pestle to mix it all together into a fine powder, and that's completely shelf stable if it's put in an airtight container. And you can share it with your friends, or you can keep it just in case you are traveling and forget to feed your sourdough. Step 2, levain, or levain in French. Here, you will need to up your measurements. It's always going to be 25 grams of your sourdough starter, but then add 100 grams of distilled lukewarm water and 100 grams of all-purpose flour. Then mix that in. You let it rise overnight or for at least 8 hours. Warm fermentation. This is the most difficult part because there's some stretch and fold techniques that you need to learn. I will share with you mine. I never use the counter. Everything happens within the bowl. Super simple cleanup. So you measure out 310 grams of lukewarm water, distilled. Put that in the bowl. You can do a test to see if your sourdough leaven is ready. It should be floating. So you add all of it. That's going to be approximately 200 grams. And then follow that with, and I already have it pre-measured, 400 grams of all-purpose flour, 50 grams of whole wheat flour, and 12 grams of salt. You mix that all together with a dough whisk, super important. And now you leave the dough shaggy. You don't go in with your hands. It's gonna be way too wet and way too messy. Shaggy dough has been resting for 30 minutes. Grab a container with cold water and you're ready to stretch and fold. Grab the edge of the bowl, grab the dough and start to stretch it out. Rotate, stretch, and fold. Scoop and let it fold on itself. Use the edge of the bowl to scrape whatever has not incorporated and also to make the dough tighter. Let it rest for another 30 minutes. Ready to stretch and fold again. Remove the cover, wet your right hand with cold water, hold the edge, stretch, and you can see how much better that stretch looks like. So all 4 sides. Last one. If your hand gets sticky, just dip it once again. Now scoop and let it fold on itself. Do this a few times. I'm using that edge to push the dough against it so it rolls and becomes tighter. This integrates bubbles into the dough. And now this can sit for another hour. After this, there's one more time. Let's dip the right hand. Last hour. Grab your 7-inch Benetton basket and dust it with some rice flour. You're ready for your final stretch and fold. Now both of your hands need to be in cold water. Make sure the dough is really tight to the feel. Drop it in. And now stitch this side. And it's okay if it's not perfect stitching at the end. It will go in the fridge for cold fermentation, and cold fermentation is very forgiving. It could be overnight, which I recommend, or for at least 4 hours. Preheat your oven to 475 degrees Fahrenheit with the Dutch oven fully covered inside. And you'll need parchment paper or a silicone mat. I prefer these, very easy to take out. And now you just flip everything over, remove, and it should be this beautiful shape. You will need some rice flour. You'll see why in a second. And a lamb. This is a blade. I recommend using the blade inside a protective thing like this. But I'm pretty used to use it with my hand, and you'll have to score the bread. But before we score the bread, we're gonna take a stencil and some rice flour and create this shape. Just like so. Take your lamb and you're ready for scoring. I hold it at a 45 degrees angle and it should be a pretty deep score. Bake covered for 25 minutes. Remove the cover and bake for another 13 to 15 minutes. Let it rest for 2 to 3 hours. And now you use the flat surface to continue cutting. You can get quite a bit of thin pieces with a very sharp chef's knife. You can get larger pieces with this one. And then this is just very easy to cut. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about this recipe. And I'll see you in the next one.
Never really said it all till you said it all. Testing, testing now. Where do we go from here? White sheets over furniture, the same as when